And last night at a comedy show in Los Angeles, Dave Chappelle was joking about being hounded by the cancel culture brigade when this happened.
Make some noise for hip-hop history. Make some noise for hip-hop history.
23-year-old Zaya Lee has now been charged with assault with a deadly weapon after he gate-crashed the stage armed with a replica gun that could eject a knife. And thank God Chappelle came away unharmed. The comedian has been at the centre of controversy after the woke mob took issue with his jokes about gender. And after the altercation, another victim of assault, Chris Rock, joined Chappelle on stage, and they were both able to see the funny side.
Was that Will Smith?
Oh, that is a good line. But joking aside, those Hollywood elites did precisely nothing when Will Smith assaulted Rock at the Oscars. It's hardly surprising, is it, that some lunatic has followed suit in an act of woke violence. Brendan ONeill here now. And Brendan, you're understandably concerned by this.
I'm very concerned by this. I think, it's still not clear why this guy did it. We don't know if he had a motive or what his justification might be. So we have to wait and see what he says or what comes out about this guy. But we know the backdrop that it's taking place against. And the backdrop it's taking place against is one in which Dave Chappelle has been brutally demonized simply for making jokes about identity politics, about the excesses of transgender politics, and really making fun of the left and the woke left and the culture wars and so on. And for doing that, he has been threatened with cancellation and called a bigot, and people have said his words are hurtful, his words are violent. So it's against that backdrop of demonization that this rushing of the stage took place. And that's why it worries me. It looks like it might be the armed wing of cancel culture, where people are now possibly going to use violence to try and silence people they don't like.
I'm really worried about that too, Brendan, because it does feel like if it's violence on the left, it will be accepted. I mean, we saw that throughout the BLM protests. We saw that with Will Smith on stage at the Oscars. It's happening increasingly.
Yeah, and I think the Will Smith thing is another important thing to talk about, because the response to the Will Smith incident was alarming. I mean, I know eventually he was banned from the Oscars for 10 years, but there was a lot of apologetics for what he did. A lot of people were saying, well, don't judge him too harshly, especially if you're a white person. You have no right to criticize, and he shouldn't. Chris Rock should not have criticized Jada Pinkett Smith's alopecia, and all these kinds of apologies for his violence were essentially made by lots of Will Smith supporters and lots of woke activists. So when you send that message that in some instances it is acceptable to assault someone who offends you, then we can't really be surprised if other people take that message on board and attack people who have offended them. So I'm very worried that the woke intolerance that we've all become familiar with over the past few years might now be entering a violent stage, and that should concern everyone who believes in freedom.
No, it absolutely does. It also concerns me, Brendan, by the way, that the reason that Dave Chappelle is in the crosshairs at all of the woke mob is because he believes in science. He talks about a biological reality. I mean, we really have to break that down, right? Because all Chappelle does is sort of poke at lots of different areas of society. But when it comes to the trans debate, he's effectively saying, I believe in biological sex.
Absolutely right. His great speech crime, as you say, is that he believes in biology. He believes there are men and women and that one cannot become the other. And in one of his recent Netflix specials, he defended J.K. Rowling, and he described himself as Team TERF. In other words, he agrees with those feminists who think that there are men and there are women and there are biological differences between them. And for doing that, there have been protests outside Netflix headquarters. People have accused him of being being a bigot and a transphobe. And now we have this violent assault, which may or may not be related. So simply for standing up for biological science, for truth, for reality, you can now be demonized and harassed and treated in the way that J.K. Rowling has been and the way that Dave Chappelle has been. This is a species of hysteria where people are being threatened and demonized simply for standing up for things that deep down we all know to be true, which is there is such a thing as biological reality.
And what's so terrifying about last night, Brendan, is obviously went off cyberspace and into the real world. But if you look at what someone like J.K. Rowling has to put up with on a daily basis, I mean, you're literally talking about hundreds upon thousands of death threats. The other day, there was a piece of work published that actually fantasized about her death. And I just think the left really have to take a good, hard look at themselves, because it's them that is creating this violent culture.
Absolutely. And J.K. Rowling is a good example of just how far the cancel culture mentality has gone, where she is, as you say, she is subjected to rape threats and death threats and vile abuse every single day. And if you look at someone like Alison Bailey, the heroic Black lesbian activist and barrister who is suing Stonewall over its stringent workplace policies on what you can say about sex and gender, people have been demonizing her. Someone fantasized about her death as well on Twitter recently. So there is this very menacing culture around the politics of transgenderism in particular, but the politics of wokeness more broadly. And it wouldn't be surprising if that menacing culture actually became something a bit more violent. So I think we have to get a handle on this. We have to stand up for people's freedom to think and freedom to speak as they see fit. And we have to defend people like Dave Chappelle, who is simply making a joke about various things in society.
On a lighter note, Brendan, just to finish with, could you believe that Chris Rock was there and he was able to come up with that witty one-liner within seconds? I know it's a really serious story, but that was quite a moment, wasn't it?
Oh, just absolutely brilliant. And Chris Rock and Dave Chappelle are consummate comedians. I mean, they are absolute pros. They've both handled assaults incredibly well. They've taken it in their stride and they're carrying on doing what they ought to be doing, which is freely expressing their comedic sense of point of view. And they should, as long as they carry on that, I think we'll all be in their corner.